The border station stood like a lonely tower in the middle of the alien desert, its lights glowing faintly under the dark red sky. A lone human traveler walked slowly toward it, his boots sinking into the sand with every step. He carried only a small bag on his shoulder, his face tired, his eyes sharp. It was clear he had come a long way. Inside the station, the alien officer sat behind her console. Her uniform was spotless, her silver badge shining. She was known as strict and proud. She believed in order, in rules, and she trusted her laws more than anything else. When the human arrived at her checkpoint window, she narrowed her eyes at him. She did not trust humans. They were strangers to her people, often spoken of with suspicion and fear. The human stopped in front of her and raised his hand in greeting. His voice was rough but calm. He asked politely for entry. He explained he needed to pass through. His words were simple but carried weight. He said it was urgent. He said lives could depend on it. His tone was desperate but also steady, as if he had prepared for this moment. The officer listened but shook her head. Her answer was cold. She told him the rules were clear. No human was allowed entry without high-level approval. She said he did not have the right papers. She said she did not care about his reason. She dismissed his urgency as lies or tricks. To her, he was just another human trying to force his way in. The human leaned closer. His eyes burned with something that made her shift uncomfortably in her chair. He told her again that it was not only for him. He warned her that danger was coming. He said the desert was not safe tonight. He said she would regret ignoring him. His voice carried no threat, only a strange certainty. The officer felt a chill in her chest but forced herself to stay firm. She stood up from her chair and walked to the glass between them. She looked him directly in the eyes. She told him again that he could not enter. She pressed a button and a steel gate slid down, sealing the entrance. The human was locked outside. He did not shout. He did not beg again. He simply stepped back and looked at the desert as if waiting for something. The officer returned to her seat. Trying to shake the feeling in her heart, she told herself she had done the right thing. She told herself the rules existed for a reason, but her thoughts kept drifting back to his eyes. They were not the eyes of a liar. They were the eyes of someone who carried a burden. She remembered the way he had said, "You will regret this," and the words echoed in her mind like a quiet alarm. The desert wind began to howl outside. Sand blew against the station walls like sharp needles. The scanners on her console blinked softly, showing the empty wasteland. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind was restless. She tapped her fingers on the desk, her ears straining for any sound beyond the wind. Meanwhile, the human set up a small camp just outside the bright circle of lights that surrounded the outpost. He laid down his bag and unrolled a thin blanket. The desert night was cold. He lit a tiny fire, its light flickering against the steel walls. Of the station, his eyes stayed fixed on the horizon. He seemed to be waiting not for sleep but for something else. The officer looked once through the window and saw him sitting there, calm and still. The firelight danced on his face. His expression was not angry, not hopeless, but patient. It made her uneasy. She had expected him to rage, to argue, to throw himself at the gate. Instead, he waited as if he knew the night itself would prove his words true. She tried to dismiss it and leaned back in her chair. The hum of the station filled the silence, but the unease in her chest grew. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face again, tired but unbroken. His warning echoed in her ears. Danger is coming. Danger is near. She shook her head, telling herself she was imagining things, but outside, the human kept staring at the desert. His hand rested on the old weapon at his side, his body tense but steady. He was not afraid of the cold or the dark. He was waiting for something he already knew was coming. The officer, safe behind her sealed walls, did not realize that her choice had already placed her in his hands. She did not yet know that by denying him entry, she had sealed both their fates together. The desert was silent, but the silence felt heavy, as if something was hidden beneath it. The human's eyes never left the shadows moving far on the horizon. The officer looked at her blinking scanner and told herself nothing was wrong. But In her heart, she already feared that the stranger's warning was true. The desert night grew colder with every passing hour. The human pulled his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders. His small fire gave little warmth. The wind blew sharp sand against his face, but he did not move away. He sat with his back straight, his eyes always watching the horizon. He was tired, his body weak from travel, but his spirit refused to rest. He knew the desert was not empty. He knew danger moved in the darkness. Inside the border station, the alien officer sat alone at her console. The glow of the screen lit her face. She tried to concentrate on her reports, but her mind kept slipping back to the human sitting outside. She could see his small fire through the window, a lonely spark in the endless wasteland. She told herself he was a fool, yet something about his stillness made her uneasy. He was, not panicking, not shouting, not begging. He simply waited, as though he expected the night to test both of them. She tried to sleep for a short while, but when she closed her eyes, she saw his tired face. His voice echoed in her head. "Danger is coming. You will regret this." She turned on her side and pulled the blanket over her shoulders, but the thought did not leave her. The station was quiet, too quiet. The sound of machines hummed in the background, but it only made the silence feel heavier. The officer got up and walked to the main window again. Outside, she saw the fire still glowing weakly. The human sat beside it, his head low, but his hand resting on the weapon at his side. He was ready for something she could not see. Her scanner beeped softly. She turned to look, but the screen only showed faint shadows, movements too far to confirm. She adjusted the settings, telling herself it was just the wind. The desert was wide, endless, and filled with tricks. Sometimes the machines picked up shifting sand and treated it like a living thing. She told herself not to be paranoid, but her heart beat faster all the same. The human raised his head, his sharp eyes fixed on the horizon where the scanner had just shown movement. He could not hear the beeps inside the station, but his instincts were stronger than machines. He leaned forward, his body tense. He felt the air change. The desert wind carried a new smell, a faint metal taste that warned of danger. The officer turned away from the scanner and walked back to her chair. She poured herself water and forced a sip, trying to push away the unease. Rules are rules, she reminded herself. He has no right to enter. I did the right thing. Yet even as she thought it, her hand trembled slightly. She placed the cup down and looked again at the fire outside. His shadow moved in the flickering light, but he did not look defeated. He looked ready. The night stretched on slowly. The officer grew restless. She checked the doors twice, made sure the gates were sealed. She told herself nothing could breach them. The station had stood for years without problem, but her chest tightened when she remembered the human's warning. The desert is not safe tonight outside. The human rubbed his cold hands together. His fire was shrinking, but he did not feed it more. He wanted the night to stay dark so he could see better. He listened to every sound, every gust of wind. He caught faint noises in the distance, soft steps, quick and careful. The hair on the back of his neck rose. He knew they were not alone anymore. The officer yawned and leaned back. Her eyelids grew heavy, but the sudden sharp beep of the scanner snapped her awake. She sat up straight and stared at the screen. For a second, she saw something, a cluster of red dots moving together, but then the signal faded. She shook her head, telling herself it was nothing, but her hand hovered over the alarm switch. The human's fire died out completely. The desert swallowed. The light leaving him in darkness, he crouched low, his weapon ready. His eyes caught movement on the horizon, shapes crawling in the sand, too many to count. His breath slowed. He knew it was only the beginning. The officer walked once more to the window. She saw only darkness now. The human, a shadow, crouched on the ground. A strange chill ran through her. She felt as if she was being watched from the desert itself. She whispered to herself that it was only her imagination, but her heart told her something else. Minutes dragged on like hours. The human never lowered his guard. He was waiting for the attack. He had seen it before. He knew how raiders moved, how beasts hunted in packs. He was certain the officer inside the station had no idea what was coming. He almost pitied her. She thought her walls would save her. But when the night decided to strike, walls were never enough. The officer finally sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She was exhausted, but her nerves kept her awake. The memory of his eyes would not leave her. They had not looked at her with anger, but with warning. He had not tried to fight her, yet somehow she felt he was already part of her fate. The night grew colder, the silence heavier. The officer's scanner beeped again, this time louder. The red dots appeared once more, closer than before. She leaned forward, her breath catching. Her hand hovered over the controls. Her eyes widened as she realized this was. The desert night broke with a sound that did not belong to the wind. It was low at first, like a growl hidden under the sand. The human raised his head, his eyes narrowing. He had heard this before, the sound of raiders moving in packs. They crept like shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. He gripped his weapon tighter, his heartbeat steady. He was ready. Inside the border station, the alien officer stared at her scanner. The red dots had returned, brighter and closer. Her hands shook slightly as she pressed buttons, trying to confirm what she saw. The screen flickered, showing movement all around the station. Dozens of signals circling like hungry predators. Her mouth went dry. She whispered to herself that the walls would hold. But deep down she knew. The human's warning was true. Then the first strike came. A loud crash shook the walls as something heavy slammed into the outer gate. The officer jumped to her feet, alarms blaring across the station. Red lights flashed. The sound of sirens filled the air. She grabbed her weapon and ran to the window. Outside, shadows moved fast across the sand, dark figures too many to count. Her heart pounded. They were under attack. The human outside was already moving. He rolled across the sand and pressed his back against a broken rock near the gate. From there he could see the raiders, tall, thin, creatures with glowing eyes and sharp weapons. They hissed and snarled, their bodies blending into the night. He raised his weapon and fired. A burst of light cut through the darkness. One raider fell. The others shrieked in anger, their glowing eyes turned toward him. The officer saw the human firing from outside. She gasped, realizing he had been right from the start. Her hands trembled on her weapon. She wanted to open the gate, but the system was already in lockdown. Her own soldiers were too far away. No help would come in time. For the first time, fear filled her chest. She understood that the stranger she had denied was now fighting for her life as much as his own. The raiders swarmed. Some climbed the walls. Others struck the gate again and again. Metal screeched, sparks flew. The officer ran to the defense controls and activated the turrets. Beams of light shot into the night, cutting down several attackers. But there were too many. For every one that fell, two more appeared. She gritted her teeth, sweat on her forehead. Her station was not strong enough to hold them back. The human ducked low as energy blasts tore through the sand near him. He fired again, quick and sharp. He moved with skill, every shot precise. He was only one man, but he fought as if he had faced this 100 times before. He saw raiders climbing toward the window where the officer stood. His chest tightened. He knew she would not survive. If they broke through, he pushed forward, sprinting across the open sand. The officer fired from her window, her aim strong but shaky. A raider lunged at her, smashing its claws against the glass. She stepped back, her heart racing. She fired again, the shot hitting its chest. The creature shrieked and fell, but more were coming. She looked outside and saw the human running toward the wall, dodging blasts, rolling through sand like a soldier trained by war itself. Her eyes widened. He was risking his life for a woman who had turned him away. The gate cracked, a loud tearing sound echoing across the night. The officer's stomach dropped. They were going to break through. She fired again and again, her weapon overheating in her hands. Sparks flew. She bit down on fear. Her mind screamed at her that she had made a mistake. If she had let him in earlier, they might have been better prepared. Now it was too late. The human reached the wall and grabbed a raider climbing up. With raw strength, he pulled it down and struck it with his weapon. The creature screeched, sand flying around them as they fought hand to hand. He killed it with one final blow, then turned to shoot another that was ready to strike the officer. From behind her window, his blast hit just in time, saving her without her even knowing. The station shook again. The gate was breaking. The officer felt her knees weaken. She thought for a moment that this was the end. But then she saw him, standing outside, still fighting, still holding the line alone. A human she had denied, a human she had insulted, now shedding blood to protect her. The thought burned in her chest, shame mixed with awe. The raiders roared louder, their numbers growing. The human's breaths came heavy, sweat running down his face. But his eyes stayed sharp. He shouted at the officer through the glass. His voice cut through the alarms. "Get ready, they're coming through." She froze for a moment, stunned that he still thought of warning her. She nodded quickly, gripping her weapon tighter. The gate finally gave way with a deafening crash. Metal ripped apart, dust and fire flying through the air. The raiders poured, inside like a flood. Their glowing eyes lit the station corridors. The officer raised her weapon, her heart pounding. The human charged in from the outside, fighting them back even as they swarmed over him. The battle had truly begun. The officer realized this was not just an attack on her station. This was a test of survival. And she knew, without the human she had turned away, she would already be dead. The human stood in the middle of chaos. Sand and smoke filled the air. The gate had fallen, and raiders rushed inside the station like a wave of shadows. Their claws scraped the metal floor, their glowing eyes fixed on their prey. The officer stumbled back as her weapon fired again and again. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear nothing else. She was surrounded. The human could have run. The desert was wide and empty. If he left now, he might have escaped with his life. He could vanish into the darkness, leaving the border station and its officer to their fate. No one would blame him. After all, she had denied him, humiliated him, and left him outside to freeze in the desert. Night. Yet when he looked through the smoke and saw her fighting alone, fear in her eyes, he made his decision. He would not run. He would fight. He rushed forward, his weapon blazing. His shots cut through the first raiders that charged at her. The officer gasped when she saw him step into the firelight. He moved fast, rolling across the ground, striking with deadly aim. Every shot was clean, every movement sharp. He fought with the skill of someone who had seen war before. The raiders turned toward him. Their hiss filled the air. They recognized the greater threat. He had drawn their attention, and now they swarmed. Him! The officer's heart clenched. She could see him fighting 3, 4, 5 at once, his weapon firing, his fist striking. His body moved with both rage and control. He was one man standing against a storm. She wanted to shout at him to tell him to run, but her voice caught in her throat. She had never seen such bravery, not even from her own soldiers. He was fighting for a woman who had treated him as nothing. He was risking everything when he owed her nothing. The thought cut deep, shame mixed with awe. The human blocked a strike with his arm, pain flashing across his face, but he did not fall. He spun and fired, dropping another raider to the floor. The officer joined in, shooting from behind him, trying to cover his back. For the first time, they fought together, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as two lives tied by survival. The station shook with the sound of battle. Raiders smashed against doors, climbing the walls, filling the corridors. Sparks flew. Alarms screamed. The officer felt sweat dripping down her temple. Her weapon grew hot in her hands, but she refused to stop. The human's presence gave her strength. Every time she thought the fight was lost, she saw him still standing, and her courage returned. In the middle of the fight, their eyes met for a brief second. His face was dirty, blood on his cheek, but his eyes were sharp and steady. He shouted over the noise, "Stay behind me, don't stop firing." She nodded quickly, not questioning his orders. For the first time, she trusted him. The raiders shrieked louder, realizing they were not breaking the humans or the officer as easily as they hoped. They rushed harder, desperate to overwhelm them. The officer's hands shook, her energy running out, but the human kept pushing forward. He grabbed a raider that lunged too close and slammed it into the wall with raw strength. His weapon blasted another that tried to strike her from the side. Every move he made kept her alive. She fired again, her shot saving him in return. A raider had crept behind him, but her blast sent it crashing down. He turned his head briefly and gave her the smallest nod, an unspoken thank you. That moment bound them not as officer and outsider, but as allies. The corridor was filling with bodies, the floor sticky with blood and ash. The officer's chest heaved with exhaustion. She had never fought like this before, not with this kind of desperation. She realized now that her rules, her pride, her cold judgment meant nothing in this fight. What mattered was survival. And survival had only been possible because the human had chosen not to abandon her. Still, the attack did not stop. The raiders came again, their shrieks echoing through the halls. The officer almost faltered, but then she heard the human's voice cutting through the chaos. "Hold the line! Don't give them ground." His words burned like fire inside her, giving her strength she did not know she had. Together they fought, step by step, their backs nearly touching as they turned to face enemies from all sides. The human's weapon clicked. Empty. Without hesitation, he swung it like a club, striking hard, his movements raw, filled with willpower more than strength. The officer covered him, firing until her own weapon nearly overheated. The raiders began to pull back slightly, hissing and circling, testing their prey. The human and the officer stood panting side by side. For a moment, the battle slowed. Silence, filled only by the hum of failing machines and the crackle of fire. The officer looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He was wounded, blood running down his arm, his breathing heavy. Yet he stood tall, his eyes sharp, his will unbroken. He had saved her. He had saved the station, and all she had done was slam the gate in his face. Her chest tightened with something she had not felt before. Regret. If she had let him in earlier, if she had trusted him even a little, maybe things would not be this bad. She had judged him without knowing, and now in her heart, she knew she was wrong. The human adjusted his grip on his weapon, blood dripping from his knuckles. He glanced at her and said calmly, "This isn't over. They'll come again." She nodded, her throat tight. For the first time, she felt safe not because of her walls or her rules, but because of him. The decision had been made. The human had chosen to fight instead of running. His choice had tied their fates together. And though the battle was not over, one truth had already been written in the fire and blood of that night. She owed her life to the man she had once rejected. The battle raged for what felt like hours. The sound of claws against metal, the hiss of alien voices, and the constant echo of weapons filled the station. Smoke hung in the air, the smell of burned flesh and metal stung their noses. The human and the officer stood together, their backs almost touching as they fought off wave after wave. Every second was survival, every breath a fight. The officer's arms shook from exhaustion. Her weapon was hot and heavy in her hands. She fired again, her shot blasting a raider off the wall. She gasped for breath, her lungs burning, sweat ran down her forehead. She was trained, but she had never fought like this. She had never felt the raw edge of death so close. Her world had always been rules, order, and clear control. But here, in this chaos, she felt how fragile those rules really were. The human was beside her, wounded but unbroken, his shirt torn, blood running down his arm, yet his eyes stayed sharp. He moved like he had fought 100 battles, rolling, striking, firing, never hesitating. Every time a raider lunged at her, he was there, pulling her back, blocking the strike, or firing, just in time. Without him, she would already be dead. For the first time in her life, she trusted someone she was taught never to trust. She had been told humans were dangerous, reckless, selfish. But this man was the opposite. He was selfless, brave, and relentless. She looked at him through the smoke and felt a strange weight in her chest, not just fear, but guilt. She had thrown him out, treated him like dirt, and yet he was fighting for her as if her life mattered to him. Another wave of raiders came, screeching and leaping forward. The human shouted for her to hold the left side while he covered the right. His voice was commanding but steady. She obeyed without thinking, trusting his instincts. They fought in rhythm, each move balancing the other. When her shot missed, his blast finished the job. When he was cornered, her weapon cleared the way. Slowly, She realized they were surviving because they were no longer fighting as two, they were fighting as one. Her leg burned where a raider's claw had grazed her. The wound bled through her uniform. She stumbled, almost falling. A raider lunged toward her. She lifted her weapon but knew she was too slow. Then he was there, pulling her out of its path. His weapon struck down the beast before it touched her. His hand lingered on her arm for a second, steadying her. His voice low but firm. "Stay on your feet. I can't hold them alone." She nodded, swallowing the fear in her throat. Her pride wanted to deny weakness. But in that moment, she accepted the truth. She needed him. They fell back deeper into the station, their boots echoing against the metal floor. Raiders hissed and crawled through vents and cracks, surrounding them again and again. The officer's weapon beeped. Warning of low power, she cursed under her breath. But the human noticed. He tossed her a spare cell from his own pack, risking a second without firing. She caught it, stunned. He had planned ahead. He had come into this desert prepared for danger while she had sat in her safe tower of rules. The shame grew heavier. Her people called humans careless. But this man had been more careful than her entire squad. She thought of the moment at the gate when he had begged her for entry, when he had warned her, and how she had shut him out. Her stomach twisted. If she had listened, maybe the station would not be falling now. Maybe lives would have been saved. The human saw the guilt in her face even as she reloaded, but he did not say a word. He only shouted, "Left side," and together they fired again, blasting through another wave. His focus never wavered. He was not here for revenge or anger. He was here to keep them alive. That truth made her chest ache. They ducked behind a broken console for cover, breathing hard. The officer pressed her hand to her bleeding leg. The pain throbbed. She looked at him and whispered, "Why are you doing this? After what I did to you, why save me?" His eyes met hers, calm even in the chaos. His voice was rough but steady. "Because running would mean leaving someone to die. I don't do that." She stared at him, speechless. His words were simple, but they carried more honor than all the rules she had lived by. The raiders regrouped outside the corridor, their hisses echoing, preparing for another rush. The human reloaded his weapon and glanced at her. "We hold them here side by side. Don't think about before, just fight." She nodded, her throat tight for the first time. She was not fighting as a border officer defending her post. She was fighting as a woman trying to survive with the only ally she had left. The attack came again, claws and shrieks filling the air. The officer's fear turned into focus. She fired with more accuracy, her aim steadier. She was no longer just protecting herself. She was protecting him too. The human grinned through the dirt and blood as their shots burned through the raiders. They were a team now, forged in fire and survival. When the wave finally broke and the last raider fell, silence returned. Both of them stood panting, their chests rising and falling heavily. The officer's arms shook, but her heart felt stronger than before. She looked at him again, this stranger, this human she had denied, and felt a new respect rise inside her. She realized she had judged him by his race, not his actions, and she had been wrong. The human sat down for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow. His voice was tired but steady. "We'll make it through this, but only if we trust each other." The officer lowered her weapon slowly, staring at him. The word trust echoed. In her mind, it was not something she gave easily. Yet here, in the blood and smoke, trust had already been forced upon her. She finally nodded, her voice soft but honest. "I trust you." And for the first time since the attack began, she truly believed they might survive. Not because of her walls, not because of her rules, but because of him. The human who had chosen to fight when he could have walked away. The corridor was filled with smoke. The air smelled of blood and burning wires. The human and the officer leaned against the wall, their weapons hot and nearly drained. Both were breathing hard, their bodies aching. For a moment there was silence, only the faint crackle of fire and the distant hiss of the desert wind pushing. Through broken panels, the raiders had pulled back, at least for now. The officer slid down to sit on the floor. Her leg throbbed where she had been wounded. Her uniform was torn and stained. She pressed her hand against the bleeding, but her mind was not on the pain. Her eyes kept drifting toward the human. He sat across from her, resting his weapon on his knees. His arm was bleeding, his face dirty and bruised. Yet his eyes were calm, sharp, and watchful. He looked like a man who had lived through worse. For a long time she said nothing. She only stared, wondering how someone she had treated with such coldness could fight with such loyalty. Finally, her voice broke through the silence, soft but heavy. "Why did you come to the border in the first place? Why did you want to enter?" The human raised his eyes to hers. His expression did not change. His voice was rough, low, but steady. "Because I had to bring a warning." The officer frowned, confused. "A warning?" He nodded slowly. "There is a greater threat coming. Not just raiders, not just wild beasts. Something bigger. Something that could destroy your world if no one prepares." Her breath caught in her throat. She thought of the scanner showing movements, of the endless waves of raiders. Her pride wanted to dismiss his words, but her heart knew better. He had been right about the attack. He had been right about the danger in the desert. Maybe he was right about this too. She leaned forward, her voice shaking. "What threat? What are you talking about?" He looked down for a moment as if choosing his words. "I have seen the signs, I have seen their scouts. They are not raiders. They are not random killers. They are something organized, something powerful. They move through the edges of worlds, taking what they want, leaving nothing behind." His jaw tightened. "I came here to warn your leaders, to tell them that their time is short. But you shut me out." The officer's stomach twisted. Guilt flooded her chest. She thought back to the moment at the gate, how she had looked him in the eye and told him no. She had thought she was protecting her people from him, but in truth she had almost doomed them by refusing to listen. Her voice cracked. "I was wrong." The human said nothing. He simply checked the charge on his weapon and adjusted his grip. His silence was heavier than words. It made her feel smaller, weaker. But then he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is surviving the night. If we do that, you can still deliver the warning. You can still make it right." She looked at him, truly looked at him. His face scarred, his body worn, yet his spirit strong. He had no reason to forgive her, no reason to stay, but he had chosen to fight for her anyway. That choice burned into her soul, she whispered almost to herself. "I should have listened to you." A loud crash echoed through the station. The raiders were testing the doors again. The officer flinched, gripping her weapon, but the human stayed calm, his eyes locked on the sound, his voice steady. "They're regrouping. We don't have long." He stood up and reached down, offering his hand to her. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was strong, pulling her back to her feet. In that small touch, she felt more safety than in all her years of training. They moved together through the smoke-filled halls, stepping over broken consoles and fallen raiders. The lights flickered. Alarms still screamed in the distance. The officer limped slightly, but the human slowed his pace to match hers. He kept glancing at corners, his instincts sharp. Every sound, every shadow. He studied with the focus of a survivor who trusted nothing. At one point they passed a shattered wall where the desert wind howled through. The officer paused and looked out at the night sky, red and endless. She thought of her people, her station, her leaders, all of them, blind to what was coming. She turned to him, her voice heavy. "If what you say is true, then everything we know could fall." The human only nodded. "It will fall unless you listen, unless you prepare. That is why I came." They pushed deeper into the station until they found a control room half destroyed but still alive with blinking screens. The officer sat at the console, her fingers shaking as she typed commands. She tried to send a signal to her command center, but the screen flashed error after error. The raiders had damaged the communications array. She slammed her fist on the console. "It's useless." The human stepped closer, placing his hand on the edge of the console, his voice calm but firm. "Then we survive. We live long enough to carry the warning ourselves, whatever it takes." His eyes locked with hers. She felt the weight of his words. He was not speaking only of survival for himself. He was speaking of her survival too. Their fates were bound now. The noise outside grew louder again. The raiders were returning. The officer took a deep breath, her hands gripping her weapon. She looked at him and said with quiet strength, "I believe you now, I believe every word, and I will help you no matter what it costs." For the first time, the human allowed a faint smile to touch his lips. It was not joy, but respect. He nodded once. "Then we fight, together." The shadows outside the broken door grew darker. The hissing voices rose. The battle was not over. But something inside the officer had changed. She was no longer fighting out of duty. She was fighting out of trust. Trust in the man she had once denied. Trust in the human who had saved her life. And as the enemy closed in once more, she knew this was only the beginning. The greater threat was still out there, waiting, but now she would not face it alone. The night felt endless. The station was broken, smoke rising from every corridor, sparks flashing from broken wires. The officer and the human stood together in the ruins, their bodies weak, their weapons nearly drained. Yet they were alive. They had fought side by side and survived what should have killed them both. The raiders had finally scattered, their shrieks fading into the desert wind. Perhaps they had lost too many. Perhaps they had sensed the two would not fall easily. The silence that followed was heavy. The officer lowered her weapon slowly, her arms trembling from exhaustion. She could barely believe she was still standing. She turned her head and looked at the human. He was covered in dust and blood, his shirt torn, a cut across his cheek. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, though she could see the pain in his body. Still, his eyes were calm, sharp, full of will. He stood tall, even after all the fighting. She realized then that he was far stronger than she had ever imagined, not just in body but in spirit. For a long time neither spoke. They only breathed in the heavy silence, letting the weight of the night sink in. Finally, the officer broke the quiet, her voice soft, low, almost ashamed. "I was wrong about you." The human turned his head toward her but did not speak. His silence made her heart beat faster. She swallowed and continued, "I judged you because you are human. I refused you because of my pride. I thought I was protecting my people, but instead I nearly destroyed them." She lowered her eyes, her voice shaking. "If not for you, I would be dead." The human's eyes softened slightly. He leaned against the wall, his weapon hanging at his side. His voice was calm, deep and steady. "What's done is done. What matters now is what comes next." His words struck her deeply. He was not cruel. He did not spit her mistakes back at her. He simply looked forward. His strength was not only in battle but in heart. She lifted her head and met his gaze. Her chest tightened with something she had not felt in years. Respect, true respect. She stepped closer, her voice firmer. "Then let me make it right. Let me stand with you." She extended her hand slowly, a gesture her people gave only in moments of deep trust. The human looked at it for a moment, then took it. His grip was strong, steady, warm. She felt a strange relief wash through her, as if a wall inside her had finally broken. Together they left the ruined corridor and walked through the wreckage. The station lights flickered, the machines hummed weakly. Outside, the desert was still, dark, the horizon faintly glowing with the first hint of dawn. The officer stopped at the broken gate, staring at it. The memory of their first meeting burned in her mind. She had stood behind that gate and told him he could not enter. She had looked into his eyes and turned him away. Now, standing at the same place, everything felt different. She turned to him, her voice quiet but heavy. "When I denied you, I thought I was strong, but I was only blind. I regret it more than anything." The human shook his head, his tone calm. "Regret won't change the past, but it can change the future." His eyes narrowed as he looked out into the desert. "And the future is where the real fight waits." The officer followed his gaze. She remembered his words about the greater threat, a force larger than raiders, something organized, something powerful. Her chest tightened with fear, but this time it was not the same fear as before. This fear came with determination. She knew now that she would listen, she would act, she would no longer let pride silence the truth. The human shifted his pack on his shoulder, his movement slow with pain but steady. He looked at her with quiet certainty. You can still warn your people. You can still prepare them. But you'll need proof. You'll need someone who's seen it. He touched his chest lightly. That's me, she nodded slowly, her voice firm. Then I will help you. No one will doubt me after this. They will hear my words, and I will tell them what you did tonight. I will tell them I owe my life to a human. The human's lips curved into the smallest smile. Tired, but real. That will matter, he said simply. Then he looked at her more closely, his voice quiet. But the fight ahead will be worse than this. You understand that, don't you? She held his gaze, her own voice steady. I do, and I will face it with you. The first light of dawn broke over the desert, turning the red sky into pale gold. The officer stood beside the human, their shadows stretching long across the sand. She felt a strange calm, even though she knew the worst was yet to come. She was no longer alone. She was no longer blinded by pride. She had found someone she could trust. As the sun rose, she thought of her people, her leaders, her world. She thought of the danger still hidden beyond the horizon, and she thought of him, the man she had once denied, the man who had saved her life. She knew now she would never forget this night, and she would never again see humans as she once had. She glanced at him one last time as they prepared to leave the broken station. His steps were steady, his eyes fixed forward. He carried the burden of truth, but now she carried it with him. Together they walked into the light of the new day. Behind them, the station lay in ruins, a reminder of pride and mistakes. Ahead of them, the desert stretched endless and uncertain. But in her heart, she felt something new. Not fear, not shame, but hope, because she knew whatever threat was waiting out there, she would not face it alone. She had a human by her side, and together they were stronger than she had ever believed possible. And though the night had ended, the story of their fight had only just begun.